Hey, did you know that schools back in the day would be let out early for kids to watch lynchings? Like public lynchings. And in a lot of cases, the lynchings would end with people taking body parts back home as souvenirs. And according to a couple Reddit posts, those families still have those souvenirs. But this video isn't about that. This is about black codes. Because a lot of people don't know what black codes are. And when you ask them what are black codes, they'll tell you something related to like Jim Crow, when black codes was well before Jim Crow. So I want to say like 15 different black codes, and I'm going to tell you what they are and what they will be considered and how they were enforced. So I just counted, and it's actually 21 of them, but the more the better. Now, if you don't know what black codes are, if you've never heard it or you've always been curious but have gotten like a vague response, the best way I can explain it is like social crimes. Now, back in the day, after slavery was abolished, the northern states had just accepted that the South was going to do whatever they wanted to do, so they decided to not get involved with whatever they wanted to do. So anything that southern states wanted to do, individual states wanted to do, they could do, and including creating random social like laws or whatever, crimes that they said applied to everyone, but really only applied to black people. Now, these crimes consisted of, we can start with vagrancy because that is typically the first one that you'll hear when you hear about black codes. And if you don't know what vagrancy is, it's basically being unemployed. You couldn't be unemployed. Along with that, you couldn't quit your job. Now, the thing about these two is they played hand in hand with each other. Back in the day, a lot of people ask, why did black people sign contracts like they end up back on the same plantation? Because you couldn't be unemployed. So the best way to stay employed is to sign a contract that basically says, now I'm employed by you. This is my protection from being arrested and ultimately put back on your plantation working for free. Mind you, black people were prohibited from working in fields other than agriculture and anything in like a servitude type of industry. That can be like a housekeeper, anything where they're your servant. When it comes to quitting your job, they will be charged with fraud. Another black code was you can't hire a free black man unless he has his discharge papers from his last employer, along with a reference. We still use references to this day, and that's where it started. Slavery. Another black code would be riding the train without a ticket. Now, what's ironic about this is the train was free. The South didn't have like the architectural design we have today, like all these freeways and sidewalks. Also, they're getting rid of sidewalks. But anyway, but they didn't have a lot of sidewalks. So the best way to get to and from one side of town to the other was the train. It was free. But if you were caught riding without a ticket, it would be considered stealing. Stealing what? I don't know. The thing about this as well is like ticket counters and ticket stations were known for refusing black customers. So you kind of had no way to get a ticket. So your only way to get across town would either be to walk along the rail, like the train tracks, which was also another black code that was illegal, or to ride the train illegally, which is also a black code, illegal. Walking along the train tracks was called trespassing. Another couple black codes would be drinking, even if you're in a saloon, drinking, gambling, carrying a weapon. The thing about carrying a weapon was it's what they deemed was a weapon. You could be carrying a fucking stick, and they say that it's a weapon. Interracial sexual relations was also considered a black code, but it only applied to the black party, and it was mostly enforced with black men marrying or having sex with white women. During that time, it was more likely for a black man to be caught up with a white woman than the opposite. Real quick before I keep going, something you need to know about these codes is they were created not to put black people in jail, but to put black people on plantations. You know, slavery was just abolished, so now you got all these free black people that can't afford to move north just wandering around. What better way to get your slave labor back than to use the loophole put in the 13th Amendment saying if they are committed of a crime, then they are servants of you, right? This was a way to get their slaves back. They weren't worried about filling up prisons and shit. This wasn't the prison boom that we know to be. That large prison boom, I would say, started during the crack epidemic. But this was just a way for planters, like plantation owners, to get their slaves back. But let's get back into it. There was also something called pig laws. Now, pig laws is kind of, the best way I could explain it was like the legal way to inflate a punishment for some bullshit. For instance, like I said, these people were not going to prisons. They were not going to jail. Sometimes they were, but the main thing was either having them pay a hefty fine, or putting them back on the plantation to work for these plantation owners. And the thing with pig laws was, say you got caught stealing a piece of bubble gum, you would be sentenced to 5-10 years of slave labor, or you'd be sentenced to like $30,000 fine, which you can't afford. So now you're being forced into either not paying this fine and going to jail, becoming a slave anyway, or going to get one of these contracts, these labor contracts, where you're put under the same conditions that a slave would be under anyway. So really, it was a full circle. They had it all mapped out, very well planned. A couple more black codes could be bigamy, homosexuality, illegal voting, selling whiskey, playing dice, being outside when the sun was out with no reason, selling cotton after the sun was set, upsetting a white woman, and a lot of other bullshit. So when someone tells you black codes is something related to black people not being able to go in certain places or use the same facilities as a white person, that is Jim Crow. That is not black codes. Jim Crow came after black codes, once it was apparent that they were using these to enslave people. White people always had the same game. They just know how to change the play up. But hopefully now you know. If you're new here, give me a follow. I teach Black history. Also tap my link tree. Did you know this? Hey y'all want to know a couple black facts? Did you know that a way that white abolitionists would gain sympathy for black people would be by dumbing them down? And by dumbing them down, I mean, for instance, Sojourner Truth's speech, "Ain't I a Woman?" was actually a very, very articulate and intelligent speech. She was not ignorant. In fact, she didn't even say, "Ain't I a woman?" in the speech. And it wasn't just Sojourner Truth, and it wasn't just on a grand scale either. A lot of times when it came to abolitionists being journalists, and they would talk to black people that lived in the northern states, or even black people that lived in the southern states that were educated, they would try to make them sound dumb to kind of get more sympathy for them. I don't fucking know. But in a way, it actually worked. In honor of Martin Luther King Day, did you know that Mahalia Jackson is the reason that Martin Luther King even said what he had a dream of in his famous "I Have a Dream" speech? Martin had 250,000 people in front of him. He had his speech on a note paper. He was not going to deviate from this until Mahalia Jackson from the crowd said, "Tell him about your dream." He pushed the notes out the way and he went on to have one of the most legendary speeches. No. Did you know that when black people from the South would move up north and they would buy their freedom, they would ultimately buy their family members? And when people say black people had slaves, they're talking about their family members. Granted, there was a class of black people that did have slaves, but it wasn't in the same capacity